Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our broadcast today. Today, we're going to hear from Phil Hughes and Jacob Schatz from our front-end engineering team. Phil will start out with a front-end update, and we will follow with a Q&A session. Please feel free to chat any questions as they come up, and then we will get to them at the end of the presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to Phil.
Cool. So I will start off with a bit of an update about how we are using Vue. So we've previously been using Vue.js throughout the app. We've got issue boards, merge request conflicts, and a couple of different parts of the app in Vue. We chose Vue because it was super simple just to add in the HTML. So we could start up with some basic HTML. Then we could add in the Vue attributes and the Vue template tags, add in the JavaScript, and then everything else is handled for us. The update of the HTML, the update of the DOM, everything was just happened without us having to touch any more JavaScript. So with this, we could solve some pretty complex problems with a lot less code. So issue boards, we have one global object state. In there, we just pass around the different issues, and then the whole DOM just updates if I was having to worry about anything. As part of GitLab 8.14, we're now using Vue 2. It gives us quite a big performance update. We're pretty much close to vanilla.js. We'll probably go a bit more fast than this when we start converting other parts of the app into Vue 2. It required a little bit of a refactor on our side. We had some, so this was an example taken from the Vue migration tool. There was some other parts of this where we had to refactor the components to actually use Vue 2, but this is sort of like the basic overview of what we had to do. Outside of Vue, we've got some updates to how we onboard users. We've got some blank states for to-dos. This is a massive improvement. We used to have where it used to be simple text on the screen saying there was no to's to do or you're all done. We've now got some nice little illustrations for issues, merge requests, and labels. And we've got so many more to come. Some of these are live on 8.14 at the moment, and some of them coming in 8.15, and they look so nice. In 8.15 and after that, we are reimagining filters to be a lot easier, faster, and a lot more powerful than what they are at the moment. So we're taking away all the little drop downs that we have, put in this single search bar. And from there, you can just select assignees, labels, milestones, anything that you could filter. And then you can save them, so you can access them again later. You've got default ones that we create for you. So this is coming pretty soon. We are going to iterate on it a lot. The first version might not be as powerful as what some of them screenshots show, but it will get super powerful, and you'll be able to create some amazing filters. We're going to update the CI. We've redesigned the actual pipelines view with the commit part, and we've now got tabs for pipeline and builds. And then in 8.15, we are going to start adding manual actions onto the pipelines themselves. So you can restart environments, stop them, restart builds if they failed, without having to actually click into the build. And come very soon, we've got real-time pipelines. So as you can see in this GIF, clicking on one on the right side and on the left side, it's automatically updated without the page refreshing. And this is built with Vue.js, and it's super cool. And this is the start of making the rest of GitLab real time. We are going to go do more of this, but this is sort of the very start of what we're going to do. As part of all this, we've got a roadmap to do over a long period of time. We're going to start introducing Webpack. So at the moment, we're using Sprockets to handle all our assets and bundle them all together into this one application.js file. So we're going to split that out and start using Webpack and npm to manage all our assets. We currently have ESLint to lint all our JavaScript files. There are some rules which you are still tweaking, but it isn't there at the moment. GitLab at the moment isn't very accessible, so we are working to improve that a lot more. And this is going to happen over a lot more releases. Some colors are changing. We're going to start adding labels to things so screen readers can see them a bit better. We have a long-term goal to completely change our CSS. At the moment, it is one massive style sheet with everything thrown in, and we are going to start to take it back a little bit and try and split them out into components so our CSS doesn't really need to be tweaked. We've got this one component that we can just then put in on any page. And then eventually, a very long-term goal is to remove jQuery. We do rely on a lot of plugins, so Bootstrap is probably the biggest one at the moment that we need to try and get rid of. But eventually, we will be jQuery-less, which is going to be super awesome. It's going to be so much faster. We are hiring. So we are hiring for some super awesome JavaScript and CSS developers. So if you go to about.gitlab.com/jobs and apply there, and we'll take any questions.
Jacob, maybe while we're waiting for some questions to come in, you can talk a little bit more about the blog post that you had written that kind of the why we chose Vue.js, and talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jacob, lead front-end developer at GitLab. And I saw some really great questions in here. Really quick, one of the questions that I saw was if we are splitting our Vue components into separate libraries of their own, and where can you get them? We are currently not splitting our Vue components into separate libraries. If you just look at the GitLab source code, you can find them. So for example, the issue boards, which Phil worked on and did an awesome job on, you can see the Vue components for that in our own source code. So, right, stuff like that. I'm just reading through some of the questions. Right, so jQuery, the question with that. With jQuery, a really interesting thing that has happened is, so when I first started developing JavaScript, the changes in browsers, the differences between browsers was huge, and you couldn't really rely on browsers to be the same. You know, you had IE6, and even all the way up until IE 10 and 11, it still was pretty different. But now we find that the difference between them is really minimal. And the JavaScript APIs that you actually have, you don't really need jQuery anymore. And if you don't need jQuery, then you absolutely shouldn't use jQuery. So there's no reason to use jQuery. Is there anything difficult that we found with Vue.js, or is there anything that we couldn't do with Vue.js? At the moment, I find that anything that you really want to do, you can do with JavaScript in general. It's just that Vue.js makes things so much easier than just writing plain old JavaScript or writing things with jQuery, because with jQuery or with JavaScript, anything where you don't have things that are connected like that, you're going to wind up writing a lot of boilerplate code to say, like, they click this button, you now have to listen for the button to be clicked, and then you have to go check the state of things, and then you have to update the button, and all those different things. But with Vue, all you're doing is just setting a variable, and everything is going to change. Now, one thing that is a little bit difficult with Vue is that you want to make sure that, because Vue does kind of attach itself to lots of things, you want to make sure that it's not attached to things you don't want it to be attached to. So, you know, if you had some sort of crazy application that had thousands of things on the screen, you wouldn't want to attach a Vue object to every single thing on the screen. You wouldn't want it observing all those things, because that's nothing against Vue. That's just, you know, speed in general. That would be a very slow thing. So that's the only difficulty I found with Vue, is just making sure that you are aware, just with any library that you would use, you want to be aware of what it's doing internally, so that you know what the differences are going to be when it's actually implemented. Like when you change something, what is it going to actually output? So that's a really good question. And I think that it's something that we're definitely working on. And another difficult thing is just making sure that we have proper tests and making sure that we're testing well, mixing that with Ruby on Rails, mixing that with the current turbo links that we have in GitLab, and that's something that we're working on fixing that whole situation. But it's going to take time, and so over time we'll be able to find the best ways to efficiently, have it interact with all the different tools that we have in there, Rails and tests and all that sort of stuff. Because you're mixing, Rails, which already has its established way of doing things, and now you're bringing in Vue, which has its established way of doing things, and how do you mix those two things together? Are there any other reasons that we chose Vue.js over something like React? So this is a question that we get all the time, and one thing that I like to bring up is that once we chose Vue.js and we start writing all this code in Vue.js, this is just a little preamble. One thing is that once you choose Vue.js, it's kind of like buying the television, that you compare them in the store, but once you get home, you watch the television and that's it. You no longer compare it to other things. We know that Vue.js is good, and we know that we're going to count on the contributors of Vue.js to make it even better. So there's plenty of information comparing Vue.js to other frameworks, comparing Vue.js to React, comparing it to Angular. I've done huge projects in Angular and React and all those different types of frameworks. And when I was looking around at those different frameworks, I saw Vue and I just gave it a try. And what I liked about it was its simplicity. And when you have an open source library or an open source tool like GitLab, and you have other people that are going to contribute to it, you want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for them to contribute to it. And I found that while React isn't particularly difficult, it does, to me, have a steeper learning curve than Vue does. And Vue, you can learn very little about it and actually get a tremendous amount done. So that's one of the main reasons that I chose Vue. It also happens to be extremely fast, and like we said, as we let the contributors do their thing and work on it, it has gotten to be even faster. And so
it's super tiny as well. Whereas with React, you've got this massive file size, and our JavaScript is
right. Exactly. So I think Phil just got cut off there, but right. So all the stuff, the main thing was, for example, the subscriber page or the issue page where you close or open an issue. When you used to click close an issue, it would do all this jQuery stuff, and now you just set a variable, and that's the end of it. So it's really nice like that. I'm just going to check a couple of the other questions here. Do we plan to proxy your backend and use server-side rendering for improving components initialization time, or we just duplicate code and pre-render things in Ruby on Rails? That is a fantastic question, and that is something that we are currently looking into right now. Right now, we have a couple of steps before we get to things like that. We have to, we want to get Webpack in there, because Webpack allows us to have the stuff that Ruby on Rails does, where we don't have all these JavaScript files directly in our source code. Why can't we pull them in the same way that Ruby on Rails does? So, right, that's the main thing that we have to get done. We want to get that done. We want to fix up the stuff with turbo links and a bunch of other stuff before we actually get to the main meat of it. So time is going to tell. And another thing we're finding out is, as our developers use Vue and become familiar with it and get better and better, we're going to find out what things we need to do to make their lives simpler. My main goal is to make the app as fast as possible and to make the developers' lives as simple as possible. Right. let's see if there's any other questions on here. Right. So right now we're in the process of not completely replacing jQuery. We're taking it one step at a time. Because the entire application was written with jQuery, the question is there a lighter weight set of utility functions that you use in JS to replace some of the handy things jQuery had to offer? So, we're not replacing everything right now. It's going to be a slow process over time. I believe that you really shouldn't spend the time to refactor tons of things at one time. I believe that we need to move forward. So we have a lot of different things that we're doing right now. So certain things are totally fine in JavaScript right now. You have the query selector all, that sort of stuff. There's absolutely no reason to use jQuery for those types of things. So you might as well use the query selector, because you're basically just, if you're using jQuery, you're piping JavaScript through a library and then winding up back with JavaScript at the end. So why not write at the lowest, why not write at the lowest possible area? So JavaScript talks directly to the browser instead of talking to JavaScript, talking to the browser, that sort of thing. So we do have some lightweight utilities that we're currently kind of putting into place to make things easier for us. And that is also a work in progress. Again, right now we have so many things in progress that it's just going to take time to do that sort of thing. And are we going to replace the entire client-side implementation with Vue? No, we're not going to do that because it's not necessary. And so our plan is kind of twofold. One, we have things that have already been written, have already been tested, they are known to work. Unless they need to change in a major way, aside from an icon change or some typo that's in there or some text that needs to change, then there's no real reason to rewrite tons of stuff in Vue.js. It does take more time than just going with the existing implementation. Now, with the pipelines, we wanted to turn that into a real-time situation. That is the perfect opportunity to use Vue.js, because when you're polling the server, you get to update lots of things at once, where when you were doing it with jQuery, you'd have to loop through all this stuff, and it's just going to be so much less code to do a real-time situation with Vue than it was with jQuery. And I know I'm comparing jQuery and Vue, and the real question is, what about Vue and React? But now that we are using Vue, that is the thing that that we're really getting into, is where do we replace jQuery? What was the time to enabling your development team to use Vue.js? How much boilerplate work was needed before getting them started? So I've had the idea of using Vue for a while, and a lot of times in GitLab, the best way to get one of these big new ideas going is to create a proof of concept. So we created tons of actually, I think we created like 3 or 4 different proofs of concepts with Vue, and we might have even been creating proofs of concepts while it was still in beta, because I had the feeling that it was going to be a big thing, and I knew that it was going far, and there was a lot of momentum behind it. So the process was really very simple, and that was another thing when doing these proof of concepts. You're asking yourself, is this going to be easier later when we need to implement tons of stuff? And thankfully, it was really easy. We were able to just kind of pop it in there, and it looked like it really worked really well. So we didn't need a whole lot of boilerplate. Now, that also has another side part where there's a lot of other things to figure out. Even though it was easy to put in, can we make things better? Can we make things testing better? And stuff like that. I'm just reading.
And I think on top of that, in one release, we had 3 different features go out that were built with Vue.js. So it was literally just 1 month from one release to the next. 3 features went out all using Vue. So it was quite simple. Right.
And one of the first features Phil built, which was a really, really awesome feature, which was the issue boards, which was a major endeavor. And from one point, you're looking at it and you're saying, well, they just slapped a whole big chunk of code of Vue in there. But in reality, we prepared for it beforehand by making tons of proof of concepts and just making sure that everything was working smoothly. And when it went in, it really went as well as we could have expected. It was so smooth, and we really didn't have a whole lot of problems with it, because when you write stuff with Vue, you wind up with less bugs because you're writing less code, and it's kind of a nice little circle of life that you get there. The question is, do we plan on doing WebSockets? Okay, so this is a great question. When we met in April for the last GitLab Summit, we talked about this extensively, and I was super excited to use WebSockets, but John Northup, who's one of our infrastructure guys, who's awesome and amazing, told me, he's like, you can't use WebSockets because it's not scalable. So, you know, when you're making a demo app and you're doing little things just for yourself, or it's even a small app, WebSockets are great. But when you have a huge application like ours, using straight up WebSockets does not work. So we have a bunch of issues out there for making GitLab real time, and we're going to start to implement those. And so what John Northup told me, what he informed me of, was that you can do basically sub-second polling, and from an infrastructure point of view, that is very predictably scalable. So right now, for the real time for the pipelines, as our kind of first thing that's truly full big picture real time, we are using polling, and it works really, really well. We talked to the infrastructure team, got them ready for that, and we're currently implementing more things to be real time, starting kind of with the CI, and we'd like to move on to the merge request to make sure that when you click merge, that it actually updates the page in real time. Right. And so although polling seems kind of like a boring thing compared to WebSockets, you have to think to yourself, okay, when you have this many users using it and people put this on their servers, then you really want to make sure that you are able to scale well and it continues to be fast. Our goal is to make GitLab as fast as possible. So whatever we have to do to make it as fast as possible, we'll do that. Okay, so let's see what other questions are there. Are there any other questions? Let me see. I think that was all the questions that I see on here. Yep. And so, right. And so like a lot of these questions were about, I don't know if you'll ever consider anything other than Vue.js. Right. So a lot of these questions were obviously about Vue.js. And we have a lot of things in the pipeline right now, not the CI pipeline, but the front end pipeline, the things we're doing right now. And so the question is, the answer is that not everything right now revolves around Vue. A lot of things revolve still around JavaScript in general and how to make JavaScript better. That's why when looking for front-end developers, I want to find someone who just knows plain old JavaScript really, really well, and then they can go read the Vue source code and find out how it works and what it's going to do. Did we consider anything else besides Vue? I considered a lot of things besides Vue. And we tested a lot of things besides Vue. We did test React. I've done a lot of Angular in the past, and I did play around with implementing a proof of concept with Angular. I played around with Mithril a lot, and turns out that Mithril is extremely, extremely fast. So Mithril is fantastic. The only problem with Mithril is that it's really unreadable, and you're basically implementing a lot of stuff in JavaScript. So it's just very not that great for readability, but for speed, it's fantastic. And so when you mix the speed and the usability stuff, you come up with Vue. So let's see. And do we have or plan to use testing? Yeah, so testing is in our blood. I don't, and all the other merge request end bosses don't let anything go through unless it's fully tested. So that even if that means that we've never done like a test of that thing before, we have to find a way to test it. We won't let anything we won't let anything go through without it, being fully tested. So we have to make sure that everything's tested, and we're currently finding best ways to test Vue. Selenium is something that I wanted to put in the past, although it's a little tricky when you have like lots of, because it needs a dedicated virtual machine, and you need those dedicated virtual machines to have individual implementations of browsers and stuff like that. And so it's definitely something that I have my eye on, and we have people that have been writing Selenium tests for us, which is really exciting. So I hope that we can get Selenium in the future, or something that helps us compare the browser differences and stuff like that, which may even help with accessibility. Our setup for testing with Vue.js is currently, so this is a crazy thing because we're kind of in the process of reworking everything. And so right now we use RSpec, and we use something called Teaspoon, which uses Jasmine. And so it just runs our Jasmine tests, and then it has fixtures that it can run for those Jasmine tests. So it can mix the Vue stuff and the Jasmine tests. Sorry, the Ruby on Rails stuff with the Jasmine tests. So that's what we use. I find that using RSpec for testing stuff is really, really great, but we need to do more into that. And we're also looking at making sure that we have code coverage. And we do have code coverage, but the question is, do we want to make sure that our code coverage works for Vue.js and stuff like that? So will you have Trello-like boards with issues in the future? Seeing that stuff like that would be much simpler with Vue. So we do have a Trello-like boards for issues. We have the issue boards, which Phil made. That was the first thing that was made with Vue.js. It's really cool, and it works really, really well, and you should definitely try it out. And we're going to start, internally in GitLab, we started using the issue boards, which is a Trello-like board, which works really, really well. So go check it out. Native web components and Polymer. Obviously, I don't have a tremendous amount of experience with Polymer, but anything that will make things faster, I would definitely have to take a look at it. But currently, we're using Vue. What are the major challenges that you found so far using Vue? What seems complex or hard to implement with Vue that you guys think could be simpler? Phil, do you think that there's anything that seems complex or hard to implement with Vue?
I guess this goes back to another question. I guess probably the hardest part for us was integrating Vue into jQuery. So we already have stuff working with jQuery. So then for the diff note, for resolving diff notes, we then needed to plug in Vue into that. So it's getting the two to work together was a bit more complex than what it should have been really, but it saved us rewriting the whole of the merge request page in Vue when we just wanted this one simple feature in Vue. So I guess that's probably our biggest problem so far.
And the only other thing I would say is that because Vue is so easy to implement stuff, you do have to be careful, like I said before, about what it's attaching itself to, and you have to be careful about speed concerns. Although with Vue 2, that's going to be even harder because Vue 2 is so fast that everything just moves so smoothly. That doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it. It means you should watch it even closer to be aware of like what's going on internally, because it probably can be faster. And so how does the graphic designers integrate into the team? Were they fully aware of everything, or did they just receive orders? So we have a whole process that we go through. And again, we're always iterating to try and make the process better. But the graphic designers are UX designers, and they're a little bit of a hybrid. And I wish Allison was here to help me out with this to make sure that I'm doing everything proper. But our UX designers are graphic designers and UX designers in this sort of hybrid. And so we plan things way in advance. So we know what the next release is going to hold. We have things that are deliverable, things that we kind of do our best to guarantee that they are going to deliver. And so the UX design, if they can, they'll try and work a milestone ahead of time to implement the designs for that stuff. And so they'll implement those designs, and through the issues, we use the issue tracker for everything. So in that issue for that thing we're going to implement, you'll see the UX designs pop up. and some conversation with the project managers, and other people will go through, and everybody will chit-chat about the designs. And then the UX will hand it off to front end, which is a little bit different than kind of everybody working together at the same time. But this is the process that we've been using, and it seems to work really well for us. But we're also trying to iterate on that process. What do we use for the build process? And I guess the question, what to use for the build process, is talking about so on the front end, the stuff that needs to be, I guess, compiled. We currently have ES6. We have ES6 files that can be compiled. They're currently compiled using ES6 sprockets. Sprockets ES6. I can't remember the exact name of it. They will be compiled eventually with Webpack, but right now we don't have Webpack implemented, and so that's where that is. We also have SAS that gets compiled, and that's compiled by Rails at the moment, although we're looking to compile that with C eventually. What do I think about Vue.x? We haven't used Vue.x. We haven't need for Vue.x yet. We use kind of a central state management ourselves, and because right now what we do is not, the whole thing is not one giant single page application. We have individual tiny little single page applications, and those single page applications get, those single page applications get updated. So the issue boards is, we use a state management object, which is just plain old JavaScript, which you can go take a look at. And once that state gets updated, it gets updated everywhere else. We haven't really had the need for anything like that yet. Now, if things change in the future, maybe we'll need that, but we haven't needed anything like that yet. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. I don't see any other questions right now. Cool. Yeah, if there's any other questions, just write them. But otherwise, a lot of those were, all of those were really fantastic questions. So thanks a lot for asking them. I really appreciate it.
And we'll also publish the recording of this on our blog. So if there are questions that come up later, people can comment there and continue the conversation there as well.
Awesome.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us today for this update and for all of your awesome questions. Real quick, I just want to let you know that next week we will be having our next webcast, and it's with our infrastructure lead, Pablo, and he's going to be talking about monitoring distributed systems with Prometheus, and that's next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Global. So thank you all for joining us today, and then look out for the blog post if you have more questions that come up later.